Hello and welcome back to our next part in our seminar series on nutrition. Today we're going to talk specifically about proteins, and the tagline that we are going to be using today is the right amount and the right types. And essentially with protein, protein gets a lot of bad raps. It gets a lot of there's a lot of myths out there about the amount of proteins that people actually need. And so today we're going to talk kind of specifically about what proteins are made of, what the function is for, what they're used for, cover some different points, and then through that I think hopefully you'll have a better understanding of what protein actually does, what it's used for, and but like with anything else, we're not going to give specifics on exactly what you need to do because protein is very individualized. There's not a standard clear-cut, this is the amount that you should take in exactly. It does vary considerably based on the person, the type of plan, and many other factors. So the biggest things with protein is just what we're going to talk about, the right amount and the right types. And the functions of protein, what protein actually does, dietary proteins, and why you take it in, is it does help you to build and repair body tissues. And in any of the structures that are involved in the synthesis of hormones, enzymes, and other regulatory peptides. So the best way just to remember that is it just helps your body tissue recover from activity. And obviously when we're talking about fitness, the most widely known activity in fitness is weightlifting and any sort of exercise, in which that actually damages and breaks down muscle tissue. And the way muscle tissue gets stronger is through that recovery process. So the main function for proteins is it does help to build and repair body tissue. So you put your body under greater stress through exercise, or even like working outdoors with like concrete or any sort of construction work or any sort of manual labor. The intake of protein helps to build greater muscle tissue from that breaking down that has happened and help repair that breakdown of muscle that occurs. Protein can be used for energy if carbs and fats are insufficient. So people that are on extremely low-calorie diets, where carbs and fats are not in sufficient levels, protein can be used for energy if those are there, but its main function should be to use for building and repairing body tissues. Protein is made up of amino acids, which are linked together through peptide bonds. And basically proteins come in two different forms, essential and non-essential. And the best way, and I'm going to try to keep this in layman's terms as much as possible, but the best way to remember this is essential are things that your body does not produce. Non-essential are things that your body already produces naturally. So essential means that you need to get it from an external source. You need to get it from a dietary source in order to get both your essential from foods and non-essential that your body produces. And there's some non-essentials that you can also supplement such as glutamine and other things to help improve performance. So when you because what actually happens is when you take in a protein, it is broken down into amino acids in your system. A couple important things to also remember is when we talk about the right amount or the right types, if you take in too much protein, it's all based on calorie balances. And if you're in too much of a surplus, where your caloric levels are too high, and let's say that you have enough protein in to help with building and repairing what we call synthesizing all of your body tissues. That's already done, and you have leftover protein that is not really needed for synthesizing and using for building and repairing. That can be stored as fat. Any excess protein that's not utilized by your body can be stored as fat. And so we really have to be careful about how much protein we're taking in. Typically, when you're dealing with a lot of fitness clients, the thing is, well, let's just take in lots of protein. where we want to look at, you know, specifically on that person, how much protein do they actually need to build and repair muscle? Because if you're using protein to build and repair muscle, anything above and beyond that just is not needed. So another thing that we also want to look at when we're looking at the right types. So we'll talk in a little bit about the right amounts, but the right types, there's two major things that we want to look at: complete and non-complete proteins. And if we just think about that, complete proteins are proteins that have a full spectrum of amino acids, that have, you know, all of the essential amino acids in that particular protein. Non-essential would be where one of the proteins may be, or one of the amino acids may be lacking, and a term that we use is the limiting factor amino acid. And the best way to think about that is the least amino acid present in a particular food, the synthesis or the building and repairing will stop or be limited to where that limiting factor amino acid is. So I guess the best way to remember that is the more incomplete your proteins are, the less of ability that your body's going to be able to utilize that protein for recovery. So it's really important that we choose the right amounts of protein, or the right types of protein, that we're getting great quality proteins that have a very good blend of essential amino acids, so our body can utilize a greater percentage of that. So if we go back to what I was just saying, the limiting factor, if the smallest or the most limited factor amino acid of those essential amino acids are still very good, then that means as a whole, because that's the default, is that limiting factor amino acid, then your protein as a whole is going to be much more complete, and your body will be able to utilize a greater percentage of the protein that's ingested. Keep in mind that your body does not use 100% of the protein that you take in. So our goal, what our key is to use better quality protein so we can use a greater percentage of the protein that we're ingesting. The best way to think about that is, I'm concerned about how much protein you take in, but we're worried more about the quality of protein than anything else, because if we go apples to apples, and this is just an example, but let's say we have this person over here that takes in 200 grams of protein, and this person over here that takes in 400 grams of protein. The person over here takes in 200 grams of protein, but they get it from great quality sources. It's a very complete, all of their proteins have great amino acid profiles. Their body can utilize and use a great percentage of that protein for building and repairing body tissue. This person over here uses 400 grams of protein from really bad sources, let's say. All they're worried about is getting their protein levels high, but they're using it from bad sources. This person over here using the 200 grams typically will be more efficient and more productive than the person over here, basically because they're getting an adequate amount of protein, they're getting in the amount that they're needed, but they're getting in a greater percentage of quality proteins that can be used for building and repairing body tissue. The other thing too is, per every gram, you get 4 extra calories per gram. So an extra 200 grams of protein is going to equate to 800 calories extra into someone's diet. So by focusing on more complete proteins, you're able to actually make those proteins more efficient and keep calories down, allowing for a less storage of body fat. So when we look at the right amount, though, the right amount will be purely based on that individual and what type of activity. Obviously, someone who's engaged in any sort of high-intensity exercise, weightlifting, high-intensity cardio, any sort of really strenuous manual labor, their need for protein is going to be higher because they're going to have much more that's going to be needed to be repaired. So it is, a lot of it is based on the activity that you're in. Typically, if we're going to put out ballpark figures, anyone engaged in activity, physical activity, whether it's weightlifting, high-intensity cardio, sports, manual labor needs to be somewhere in the range of 1 to 2 grams per kilogram of per day. And so that's going to vary greatly, but it's also going to greatly depend on that individual, how much actual protein they need to take in based on how much muscle they have on their body, the extent of the physical activity that they have, and where exactly their goals are moving forward. But typically, we really want to stay, especially when we're talking about fat loss, we want to stay away from extreme diets that limit both carbohydrates and fat, because protein can be used for energy, but if we're utilizing protein for energy and our caloric levels are too low, there's not going to be enough leftover protein to do the essential things for repairing body tissues and building of muscle tissue as well. So the best option for fat loss is to utilize a carb or a fat source for energy, and then utilize protein for your building and repairing of body tissues. And it's also where supplements can become very, very important, where you can take in meal replacement supplements for extra protein, preferably one that has a great amino acid profile. You can take in external branched chain amino acids, essential amino acids, especially right after working out, when your body depletes amino acids during working out. A combination of a quick protein that has essential amino acids, branched chain amino acids, and maybe a quick carbohydrate to replenish glycogen that's lost during working out, and also amino acids that are lost during working out. Another factor too for proteins is it can really help reduce hunger. Those that typically do just carbohydrate-oriented diets and keep their proteins and fats low will notice that their hunger may increase a little bit more. Having diets that have an ample amount of protein and fat can also reduce a lot of the insulin that's being released, causing for less hunger and less of the likelihood of cravings to be happening. So I hope that kind of gives you an outline. One of the things at Forster Fitness is we try to provide a ton of a lot of personal attention to people, so we're not just giving cookie cutter plans to people, because the amount of protein that is needed for each person really depends on that person. But I wanted to give you a baseline to what proteins actually do, why it is so important to focus on the right amount for your activity levels, and secondly, the right types. So we're focusing more on complete proteins and utilizing a greater percentage of the proteins we take in versus just taking in protein. So that's kind of a basis on protein. Later on in our seminars we'll talk about how we put it all together, and tomorrow we're going to get into the discussion about carbohydrates and some of the myths associated with them. Thank you for joining us, and have a great day.